Okay, let's start with the immune system, immune 1, this video. I have to warn you that the immune system is one of the more difficult chapters. Students have traditionally had problems with this chapter because it's complicated. It's a bunch of small moving parts. White blood cells that talk to each other in various ways and do different things to help protect us against invaders. And the immune system really is the only thing that is protecting you against all kinds of really nasty stuff out there. Some stuff you never even hear of because nobody gets these things unless your immune system is destroyed. And you just see it in people with compromised immune systems, like people with HIV, who get these opportunistic infections that nobody gets if they have an immune system. Okay, so we're talking about infectious agents. The first slide talks about infectious agents, some living, some not living. Bacteria, of course, we can get infected by bacteria. As a matter of fact, anytime you break open your skin, you get bacteria in it. They're everywhere. I mean, where are bacteria located? Everywhere. Viruses. What do you know? Viruses, of course. What you're dealing with right now, that's why we're doing video lectures. Virus or infectious agents. They are not living things. They are infectious crystals that organisms have been living with for billions of years. I mean, they probably when the very first cells evolved on Earth, there were viruses there. Fungi. We can get some fungi. We can actually get infected by some fungi, and we'll talk about some of those. Protozoans or protistas. There's several protozoans out there, and these are eukaryotic cells. Remember, bacteria are prokaryotic cells, and there are eukaryotic cells that can infect us also. Then there's whole multicellular organisms, little tiny animals that can infect us. These are mostly worms. That doesn't happen too much in the US anymore, but it still can. And then there are prions, the most bizarre of all infectious agents, because they are also not living, and they also don't have nucleic acid. It was once thought that in order for something to be infectious, it had to have nucleic acid. And even viruses that are not living have nucleic acid. Prions are infectious proteins. It's really bizarre. And maybe we'll have some time to talk a little bit about those later on. Okay, so one of the tough things about the immune system is all the different cells that we'll be dealing with. And as we've already seen in the blood chapter, we could talk about the different types of blood cells. Overall, there's one type called granulocytes, and they are neutrophils, eosinophils, and basophils. And they all do something a little different. So we're going to look at, in a later slide, the specific things that these different cells do. Neutrophils are the most common white blood cells, and eosinophils and basophils. And then there are certain cells called monocytes that become macrophages, which are big phagocytic cells. Then there are lymphocytes, B lymphocytes, T lymphocytes, and things called natural killer cells, or NK cells. Then there are dendritic cells. These are in skin and mucous membranes. They form sort of the part of that border guard I was talking about in the lymphatic lecture. They are phagocytic and what is called antigen presented. This is a way at which some immune cells stimulate other immune cells by antigen presented. And you're going to need to know what antigen presenting is, and we're going to talk about that in more detail later on. So where do you find these cells? Well, in lymphatic tissues. And so in lymph nodes, in mold tissue, nodules, spleen, thymus, lymphatic tissue, you find these cells, but you also find them in other tissues. Alveolar and hepatic macrophages. We have these big phagocytic cells that are in our alveoli, in our blind-ended sacs in the lungs where gas exchange occurs, because breathing in, as we've moved from having to wear these masks, breathing in is a source of infection. And you can breathe in this stuff and it can get down into the alveoli, and these macrophages can detect it and can sometimes wipe them out. In the sinusoids of the liver, another possible source of infection. Why is that? It's because, as I mentioned before, with the lymphatic system, everything you eat goes right to your liver except for fat, and there's bacteria in everything you eat, and there's a possibility of these bacteria getting across your GI tract and getting into the hepatic portal vein and getting into the liver. So there's hepatic macrophages that wander through the sinusoids looking for anything foreign to surround it and eat it. All right. Microglia in brain. Remember, the brain, as we learned last semester, it's a special gated community, and they have their own cops, their own police force. Regular immune cells from the immune system cannot get into the brain, so they have microglia cells that can detect foreigners and attack them and eat them in the brain. So those are immune cells in the brain. Skin and mucous membranes, you're going to find them underneath all your skin. You have these dendritic cells that are phagocytic, that are acting again as border guards. And then in connective tissue, mast cells that are similar to basophils that release inflammatory chemicals that cause inflammation. Inflammation is an immune response, and it's a really important immune response, but it's dangerous if it gets really, really extensive. But in localized places, inflammation is a very important immune response. So here are the leukocytes to the left, circulating in blood, neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, eosinophils, and basophils. Then where we find them on the right, lymphatic tissue, lymph nodes, spleen, tonsils, select organs, for example, the lungs. There's an alveolar macrophage. There's dendritic cells in the skin that can detect foreigners. And then in connective tissue throughout the body, mast cells that can release inflammatory chemicals if some damage has occurred. Okay, cytokines. These are signaling molecules between immune cells. They're paracrines. They And this is how these white blood cells talk to each other. They secrete these things, and this leads to a stimulation of other cells, sort of like a warning. Oh, we've got an invader. Fire up. Get ready to make antibodies or make new cells and fight this guy. And the colony stimulating factors are also some cytokines that will help turn on leukapheresis and make new white blood cells. They're weapons in the arsenal. And there's lots of different cytokines that you often call leukotrienes and or interleukins. And we are going to later on look at just a couple of these, interleukin 2 and then interleukin 4. Okay. Overall, big picture in the immune system, you can divide our immune response into two broad categories: innate immunity, or also called non-specific immunity, responds to all kinds of various substances, not specifically, just as long as they're foreign. And then there's adaptive immunity, which is also called specific immunity, and it responds to specific foreign organisms and foreign infectious crystals, and sometimes just foreign proteins. As a matter of fact, that's generally how we detect a foreign. We detect an antigen. Now, we talked about antigens in blood type. We talked about a foreign protein. We talked about blood types. I'm blood type A, therefore so I have A protein. B protein would be an antigen to me. And any proteins on the surface of bacteria or on viruses, or just a foreign protein that gets into your body because of a snake bite or spider bite, those are antigens. And they are attacked specifically, they're specifically identified and attacked by B and T lymphocytes. So they are the cells of adaptive immunity. There's the spreadsheet there, or a breakdown of the two. This is on the bottom of page 863. On the left, innate immunity, immediate response to a wide array of substances. And one immune organ, usually don't think of that, is your skin. It's a barrier. It's a pretty good barrier to infection. Right? Skin and mucous membranes just prevent the entry of this foreign organism. And then there's non-specific internal defenses. We'll look at some cells, macrophages, NK cells, that can detect just any foreigner that's wandering around. There's chemicals, immune chemicals, that can affect a foreign organisms, like interferon and complement, and we'll go through each one of these. Then physiological responses, processes such as inflammation and fever. Okay, over on the right side, adaptive immunity, delayed response to specific antigens. And this is delayed because it takes a while to identify the foreigner and to get together the troops and get the troops ready to fight this invader. And that takes some time. And sometimes in the meantime, we're miserable. We're really sick, feel lousy, we're laid up in bed, and we'll wait. And this is because this specific immunity, adaptive immunity, takes time to gear up and fight the infected. the invader. And these are T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. T lymphocytes are the mediators of what's called cell-mediated immunity, which means T lymphocytes fight foreign cells. Not only foreign cells, but oftentimes your own cells that are infected by a virus. Oftentimes, what we're going to see is some cells that get infected by a virus put protein information in their cell membranes and to inform these immune cells that I'm infected. So please come by and kill me, please. It's cell suicide called apoptosis. Also, your immune system helps to actually prevent cancer. Fortunately, cancer cells oftentimes tell the immune system that I've become transformed, I've become cancerous, I can't help myself, please come along and kill me. So one of the things that the immune system does for you is also it helps prevent cancer. But on the right are the B lymphocytes, known as humoral immunity. That means blood-borne. And these are the cells that become what are called plasma cells when they are activated, and they synthesize and release antibodies. These are the cells that are responsible for the making of antibodies. So they can respond to bacteria like the T cells, but they can also respond to viruses and just any kind of foreign protein that happens to be dissolved in your blood and gets into the lymphatic system. T cells can't do that. T cells only work against cells, your own infected cells or cancerous cells or foreign cells. B cells work on foreign cells and viruses and just foreign dissolved proteins. Okay, first we'll go through the parts of innate immunity or non-specific immunity. First line, so we have these lines of defense. First line of defense, second line of defense, third line of defense. First line of defense, barriers, the skin and mucous membranes, barriers to infection. I mean, your skin is coated with bacteria, but it's not getting in because we have, because those cells are filled with keratin, they're tough, and they prevent infection. But also, we have some antimicrobial chemicals that are secreted by these barriers. One is lysozyme in saliva. So it's an enzyme that can chew up bacteria in saliva. Then we also have these defensive chemicals that can chew up bacteria called defensins, and they're secreted by your skin. Now remember, speaking about bacteria, we have some bacteria inside what we call helper symbionts, our normal flora. These are the trillions of bacteria that are in your digestive tract at the moment. There are trillions of them, and they're your symbionts. Symbiosis is two organisms living together, and they are living with you. We think of ourselves as one organism, but you're not one organism. You're a colony of organisms. You have bacteria all over your body, in every orifice, and in your GI tract. But they're not inside your body. The ones on the outside are still on the outside. The ones on the inside are in your GI tract. And this is not inside your body. Your GI tract is an open-ended tube from mouth to anus, and your body's wrapped around it. So inside your GI tract is not inside your body. If it was, you'd be dead. You'd have a massive internal infection. That's called sepsis. When you have bacteria that gets into your blood and throughout your body, that's called sepsis, and it's usually lethal. And also, there are huge pH changes across your GI tract that will be lethal if your body were exposed to it. So you're living with all these symbionts, these trillions of symbionts, and they are helping you. And when we get into the digestive system and nutrition, we'll learn how our symbionts helpful. And it's good where those symbionts are, those coliform bacteria or fecal bacteria. That's good that they're in your colon. Not so good in your mouth. This is called food poisoning when we get coliforms, fecal bacteria in our mouths from infected food. All right. So that's called the normal flora. Those bacteria in your GI tract. Flora sounds like plants because they used to be put in with plants, and so now they're called flora, although they're bacteria. Okay, innate cellular defenses, leukocytes and macrophages, neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, lymphocytes, as I mentioned before in the last slide, these are all circulating. And the natural killer cells, they circulate throughout your entire body. It's called immune surveillance. Look, they're just going through the neighborhoods of your body. They can leave your cardiovascular system and just go through the interstitial fluid, knocking on doors, checking out proteins on the surface of your cells to make sure that all the self-proteins are there and there's no foreign proteins around. So in this sense, your immune system is really xenophobic. What it means is it doesn't like foreigners. No foreigners allowed at all. Whether they're dangerous foreigners, pathogenic organisms, or sometimes if they're just innocuous foreigners, like pet dander, like shellfish proteins, like peanut proteins in allergies. Allergies are an immune response to innocuous, that is non-dangerous proteins. And we all have a little bit of this, and some people have a more serious ones that can actually be lethal, just an inappropriate immune response. So this is it. The immune response is a marvelous, incredible system that protects you against really serious, dangerous organisms and crystals. But it's also stupid in a sense because it just affects foreigners, and it doesn't matter what the foreigner is. And sometimes it makes a mistake and thinks your own cells are foreigners, and these are called autoimmune diseases. It affects innocuous foreigners like allergies, and even helpful foreigners in organ transplants. That's why you just can't get an organ from anybody, because we have a set of these cell ID proteins that are on the surface of all of your cells, and you have a unique set of them. No one else has exactly the same set unless you have an identical twin. And in order to get an organ from somebody else, you have to have a similar set, assuming you don't have an identical twin, a similar set of these what we call major histocompatibility complex proteins, cell ID proteins, in order to get an organ from somebody. And you still have to take immune suppressive drugs for your entire life but you can get an organ from somebody if you have a similar set of those proteins. And then monocytes. Talking about monocytes, they become other white blood cells like propylia, alveolar macrophages, hepatic macrophages. Oh, the porphyrins and granzymes, I'm sorry, that was on there also. You're going to see that natural killer cells actually inject or release these proteins called porphyrins that make a hole in a foreign cell. Or in one of your cells that is infected with a virus, and then they inject these granzymes, which are like digestive enzymes, that get into those cells and chew them up and destroy them and kill the cell. That's why they're called natural killer cells. Okay, here are some white blood cells. And I talked about before how each one of these types of white blood cells has a role that attack different things in a non-specific way, but specific in the sense that they do this one particular thing. Neutrophils and macrophages are phagocytic cells that surround foreigners, bring them in, put them into lysozymes with digestive enzymes, chew them up. Basophils and mast cells release inflammatory chemicals that cause inflammation, that helps flush systems into lymphatic drainage and actually fight cells at the site. NK cells, apoptosis initiating cells, either with these porphyrins and granzymes, either a virus-infected cell, a cancer cell, or a foreign cell. And then eosinophils are usually fight multicellular organisms, multicellular invaders like worms. So parasite-destroying cells. Okay, I'm going to stop right there, and we'll get into continue with innate immunity in the next immune system video. So I'll see you later.